and welcome to Don't Ask Me Shit, the podcast where we stop pretending, stop sugarcoating, and stop dancing around the real issues. I'm Coach Dorie, your stress management and relationship recovery coach, helping people heal from toxic family, friends, and romantic partners. This is the place that for the conversation people avoid relationships, accountability, self sabotage, healing, boundaries, and all the messy stuff folks don't want to talk about. But here's the deal. You can ask Coach Dorie anything, but if you're not ready to do the work, don't ask me shit because I'm not here to co-sign your excuses. I'm here to help you grow. So today I want to welcome, and I just closed that screen accidentally. Oh my gosh, here we go. Already.
No problem.
Me and my nonsense already. Where
Let
do you,
me know if you want me to. I can introduce myself. Not a lot to say.
yeah, let's do that this way this time because the whole screen just disappeared while I
All right.
look
All
for
right.
them.
You
Go
work with
ahead.
multiple screens. I got a couple screens open myself. So if you see me look off, I'm just trying to keep myself on track and point myself back to my notes. But my name is Charles Cogshell. I've worked as a social worker for, we'll just say, over 20 years now. My background in education, I studied St. Louis University for my undergrad in psychology. Did graduate studies at Washington University, earning a certificate as a certified research assistant. I've taken multiple trainings in counseling-led groups, have a deep fascination and done some intense study, neurobiology of trauma in the brain. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and my history of clinical services here in St. Louis.
Well, cool. So, Charles, I had you on here today because the other day I had a thought, and I was thinking about all these ADHD symptoms that I tend to exhibit, but then I'm also realizing that trauma mimics neurodivergent brains. And so I got to asking myself the question, like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Which comes first, the ADHD or the trauma? Or is it both? So it made me think about you because we've worked together in the past and you're always a great, excellent resource for me to go to when I have these kind of questions. And so it's like, hey, let me reach out. And I thought we'd just share this with you guys today on the podcast, and helping Charles helping us answer this question. So first, I want to ask you, the term neurodivergent. It's being widely used, but I think a lot of people don't really understand what it is. We only know things like ADHD, ADD, and things like that. Can you explain what neurodivergence is in a simple way for us to understand?
Absolutely, absolutely. It has become a very commonly used term. Um, in its simplest form, it's defined as a brain that functions, it learns and processes information differently. Uh, so that's what it means to be considered to have a divergent brain. So your mind literally processes and learns differently from others. Hence, you have the term that is often used a lot now, neurotypical. So neurotypical is referring to anyone that has a common. I don't like the they use sometimes they use the word normal functioning brain because everyone's brain is unique and individual. So you have a person who learns and processes information in the most common, typical ways. And these individuals, because neurodivergence it gets into how the brain is literally wired. Neurodivergence is something that you're born with. Your brain is typically is wired differently, so it responds to sensory information, auditory, visual, whatever, differently than most of society. And
Okay.
so we can think about it in terms of neurodivergence as being on a spectrum. And you already mentioned ADHD, and I know we're going to get into a deeper dive about that. But when we talk about uh, neurodivergence, we're really talking about this spectrum. Think about it as a spectrum. Uh,
Mhm.
on the spectrum at the lowest end, you have ADHD again, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, to
Mhm.
uh, furthest extreme of the spectrum, you have autism spectrum disorder and Asperger's. So we're all somewhere on the continuum of
Oh, okay.
having some features of ADHD through autism, which a lot of times people think of autism and they think of individuals maybe that are nonverbal, but you have high functioning individuals who are also on that autism spectrum, and they use the most commonly used term for that is Asperger's syndrome.
Mm.
So I really just like to share that it's a spectrum. Um, and the two most kind of just to kind of set level set examples, because I want to really kind of push people away from some of the negative context around autism
Mhm.
when we talk about the spectrum from ADA to autism, ADHD to autism, as individuals with Asperger's who are extremely intelligent. You can be extremely intelligent
Mhm.
and high functioning. And the two most common references that are often cited that many people will know are Elon Musk identifies himself as a person who is neurodivergent,
Okay.
manufacturer of Tesla and X and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure many of your watchers in public will be familiar with him, and also Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, is
Okay.
also has self-identified himself as a person who has neurodivergent, brain.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, that does. I didn't even realize that they were a part of that community. So that's actually kind of encouraging.
You can
It
be, I mean,
it
many
is.
individuals on the neurodivergent spectrum again are like literally considered brilliant or genius.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
we put that word autism in there again, I know sometimes in the public zeitgeist, people have this real limited um, conception of what it means to be autistic, and they think it means that you're lesser than or slow. It's like, well, I may be a little ADHD, but I'm not autistic. Well, you can be
Right.
autistic and brilliant.
And yeah, right. So, with that being said, and thanks for pointing out the brilliance of the brains that are on this spectrum, but there are a lot of us that have different symptoms from the on the spectrum that are not as helpful for us in our everyday lives. And a lot of times we talk about ADHD and can you tell us what some of those things that can be challenges in our life? With
Certainly, in particularly when you talk about attention deficit disorder, again, we talked about that being the beginning kind of part of the scale of the spectrum. Individuals that have difficulty focusing is one of the core traits of uh, attention deficit disorder. Emotional dysregulation also
mm,
commonly thought of as a symptom of ADHD, but individuals um, with ADHD tend to have higher rates of emotional dysregulation. Emotional dysregulation is just our ability to manage big emotions.
oh
Uh,
wow.
we're
Okay.
always, I love how psychology has moved toward understanding that all this stuff is just on a spectrum, and you may have high degrees of struggle with emotional regulation or lower, but some increased difficulty with regulating emotions is seen in ADHD. Impulsivity. When we talk about ADHD, it's actually there's two variances of it: attention deficit disorder and attention deficit disorder hyperactivity. You don't have to have both. And I don't think
Mm, right.
sometimes media does a good job of explaining you can just have the straight inattentive form, or you can have the form that is accompanied by impulsivity. The impulsivity is those individuals that obviously they have problems with impulse control.
Right.
And still, as an example, we use with children because oftentimes these things are first identified in young children when they go to school. In the circle time, they need to sit on the circle, and little Johnny's running around everywhere. It's like, Johnny's. We commonly use the word hyper or
Right.
impulsive. again, having problems regulating big emotions, impulsive, attention and forgetfulness kind of go together too. Is the other piece of ADHD that sometimes kind of gets forgotten. We talk about, yeah, I'm doing things and I'm trying to multitask, but I'm struggling sustaining attention. But having a more impacted ability to remember things, forgetfulness is also a key component of a true ADHD type diagnosis.
Okay. Wow. You just threw some things in there that I was not. That whole emotional regulation.
E-
I didn't realize that that was a symptom of hyper ADHD.
That's one of the key components when you're doing a thorough kind of review. You really want to check in on emotional regulation skills as well. A big part of school, one thing that I love that's come out of a lot of research that's done on this, is a lot of schools are shifting and focusing more on teaching very, very young children uh, as a key skill. The ability to regulate their emotions, the ability to self-soothe, to self-calm. Because if you can catch, even if you struggle with poor attention, or increase impulsivity, if you have an aware of naming big emotions,
Mhm.
labeling big emotions, and the self-soothing skills that you can do to calm those emotions down, a lot of times it helps them to function and be able to learn better. So emotional regulation is key in this conversation.
Wow. Wow. So switching to trauma, how can trauma symptoms create and mimic those ADHD symptoms that you just named?
Absolutely, absolutely. Trauma. Um, One of the key distinctions when you're talking about trauma is an individual that has experienced some severe experience in life. There's environmental traumas. You can be in an earthquake, a flood, or whatever. There's interpersonal traumas.
Mhm.
We think about individuals that have been in a car accident. We think about sexual trauma for women that have experienced sexual abuse. So there's many different types of trauma and many things that can um, cause people to have PTSD from a trauma. But the key core component of it is individuals with, at least I'll say, severe traumas may experience things like flashbacks. So they
Mhm.
have these undesirable memories of that rape or of that car accident. In very extreme cases, individuals that have experienced trauma may actually do what's called dissociation.
Mm.
Dissociation involves individuals that like literally will lose tracks of time that will go unaccounted for in their mind. And
Mhm.
this dissociation is much more rare, but in extreme trauma situations, you can experience individuals that do dissociate. We think about in those again extreme cases, the new we used to use the word multiple personality disorder. The new language in the DSM is dissociative identity disorder. So again, we're
Mm.
talking about the most acute form of trauma and people dissociating where they literally will lose track of times, experience, they're unaccounted for in their mind. But the key parts of the brain, attention, emotional regulation, hypervigilance, that were talked about that are hallmark features of attention deficit disorder are also seen in individuals who have these severe traumatic experiences. So they're both struggling with, attention, focus, emotional regulation to the extreme dissociation. But with trauma, we know that there's an event or a series of events that's impacted their brain as to why they're experiencing flashbacks, dissociation. So, though that's how you're gonna. One of the things you want to look at to differentiate if someone's having these struggles because of past experience versus a brain that's just wired differently in an ADHD kind of circumstance or situation.
Okay. Do these, I deal a lot with toxic relationships and betrayal trauma. Um, in relationships, whether it be family, friends, or romantic partners. And
Mhm.
a lot of times I talk about the trauma that comes from those type of relationships, and people usually say it's unforgiveness, it's you just haven't healed, you're bitter, you're hurt. Not to put them up there with earthquakes and national disasters and things like that, but can a person experience these type of symptoms even with betrayal trauma? Um, or is it just something that's with bigger things? Is there a
No,
difference?
individuals certainly can experience all those issues in terms of what's called executive function order. So the
Hmm.
prefrontal cortex, the front part of your brain, which is responsible for what was called executive processing. So planning, shifting attention,
Hmm.
logic and reason, those are can be as equally impaired from a traumatic experience and or I won't use the word simple, but an ADHD rewiring of the brain. So that it's that exact same area of the brain, that frontal lobe that regulates our ability to sustain logic, to remain calm, to shift our focus, is impacted whether it's by a traumatic event or because we're neurodivergent, our brain is just wired differently. So again, you typically will not see uh, dissociation, flashbacks uh, in an individual that has ADHD, but that frontal lobe is just as
Hmm.
significantly impaired. Their ability to calm themselves when their emotions are triggered are equally impaired, whether it's because their brain is wired differently because they were born neurodivergently, or they experience individual or repeated traumas. I did a lot of work with children in foster care who grew up in chaotic environments, who
Hmm.
sustained physical abuse and again, or sexual abuse or neglect. We should not forget neglect. All these
Wow.
experiences as a child literally rewires our brain so that the frontal lobe, the executive lobe functions differently. Uh, our startle response is different. So our ability and capacity to function neurotypically are impaired. And it really doesn't matter whether it came from an internal rewiring that occurred at birth or an external change to our wiring because of outside forces and trauma. So they are very much different, but very related and impact the same brain systems. It's a little scary sometimes for me when you think about uh, both interpersonal relationships and assaults on our person, on our sense of safety and change our brain. Neuroplasticity is the idea that our brains have the ability to wire through our life. There was a time that we thought you're born and you kind of get what you get in the genetic lottery. Your brains
Hmm.
don't change after age. We now know that our brain is constantly rewiring throughout our lifespan. The 0 to 5 is a very critical period of time for brain development and brain wiring. But our brain has the capacity to change throughout our lives. And when I change, rewire and make networks that allow us to function well in life, to regulate our emotions well, to be able to, do those executive orders well, or to be easily dysregulated emotionally. So, no, excellent question.
Wow. So this is scary to me because there are certain things that I know even in my own personal life, I've began struggling with a lot of these symptoms because of some narcissistic and traumatic relationships. However, there are things when I think back in my childhood, even though home life was a little chaotic, so it might explain why I was dealing with still these same symptoms,
Mhm.
but it makes me wonder if I was struggling with ADHD symptoms, if I've diagnosed myself as ADHD because it's just easier, but if I
Yeah.
actually am clinically ADHD. So is it possible for a person to be both? If can both things be happening at the same time?
Absolutely, absolutely, they can happen at the same time. They can compound each other, obviously,
Mm,
but you can certainly have an individual who has had both childhood and adult experiences, maybe where they started off wiring, neurodivergently, where they were maybe going to be a little more of a sensitive person.
hmm.
They were going to be more sensitive to sounds. They were going to be more sensitive to lights,
Mm,
overstimulating them. They just don't have, they were born with a lesser capacity to manage those things. And then as you go on through life and have other experiences, and particularly traumatic. Because I always like to we talk about what I call the little T traumas and big T traumas. So, I started off talking about, being in an earthquake, being in a car accident, being in, an abusive relationship. Those are kind of what I call the big T traumas. But little
right.
T traumas, neglect, uh, and I don't want to put the category of abusive or narcissistic relationships in a little t trauma, uh, but they both can impact us significantly, and those two things can absolutely be playing off each other. Having a brain that was probably wired to be a little more ADHD, beginning of the spectrum, and then kind of tweaked or pushed over into higher levels of dysregulation
Mhm.
because of relationships, toxic relationships. I know you
Right.
educate a lot about that. Those toxic relationships especially a brain that's already leaning in that direction, uh, can certainly be impacted and heavily dysregulated from relationships. Our typically our mother child relationship is our first learning patterns about how we get our needs met or not. So that's the
Right.
foundation. But then the subsequent relationships that we have after that inform our brain's ability to feel safe and connected in relationships or not. And if your
Wow.
brain is not feeling safe, we can get into it later, but the amygdala is a deep subcortical structure of the brain, and with the amygdala's whole function and job in the world is to sense threats in the world. So
Wow.
going back to that old neurobiological example, when early man
Right.
on the savannah, if there was a saber-toothed tiger or whatever, you had to be alert or that tiger
Right.
hit you. You're not stronger than that tiger. You're not faster than that tiger. You have to be able to get away from that tiger. So
Right.
there's an amygdala deep in your brain that it senses threats in the environment.
Is
But
that the part that controls the fight, flight, or freeze?
exactly. So your
Yep.
fight, flight, or freeze instinct is activated based on the amygdala, and it's constantly scanning your environment. Are there threats? You know,
Mm,
So, again, in those olden days, the threat, was this other animal going to eat me? In contemporary times, is the threat are my needs just not going to get met because mom didn't meet my needs because my caregiver, my spouse, my friends, they're so my brain is always sensitive to the fact that am I safe? Are my needs going to be met? Uh, and again, individuals, whether it's from wiring, from birth, or from trauma, have oversensitive amygdalas are always in a threat state. They're always in a survival mode. When your amygdala is, uh-oh, not sure what happened. I lost my camera here. Let me see if I can reach. Okay, sorry. I think I may have timed out for a minute. Am I back?
I still see you.
Okay,
Yeah.
my camera just shut out. So I was saying though, the brain and in particularly the amygdala is always seeking those threats, and when there's trauma, or if it's neurologically just kind of wired into you, you're a more sensitive person. Uh, it overprotects you, and it avoids that prefrontal cortex, the reasoning part of your brain, from saying, "No, that's not a snake. That's a stick."
Right.
But my overly active amygdala from trauma or wiring is going to say, nah, that's a snake. It's going to kill me.
Right.
So it
Wow.
makes it difficult to function in the world when even very small threats are perceived as huge threats. But they work together absolutely for people that are on the spectrum and are not, or who have had trauma and are not.
Mm. So my question then for when you have someone that maybe already their brain is predisposed to functioning in a neurodivergent way, um, can those people be more susceptible, more vulnerable to trauma, especially when it comes to in relationship? I mean, because of course you're not everybody driving is vulnerable to in a car accident, but in relationships and things, can a person be more vulnerable to trauma?
Absolutely, I believe so. And from what research I've read in regards to this, why individuals that are kind of already have increased sensitivity in their brain uh, may be more at risk uh, is in regards to it gets into some deep again neurobiological stuff in terms of cortisol in the brain. So cortisol is a stress hormone that's a release. You mentioned it already yourself in terms of that fight, flight, or freeze instinct.
Mm-hmm.
So individuals that are already kind of primed because of the wiring of their brain, because of ADHD and other things on that spectrum, and they experience trauma. What they have is what's called more higher levels of free floating cortisol in their brain. So
Okay.
that kind of predisposes them that cortisol is up there. It's doing kind of what it's supposed to be doing in their brain, but their levels are so high, their cortisol and their adrenaline it gets their heart racing and their body, kind of going 1,000 miles an hour. So the two combine. Um, I'm not sure if I answered your question though.
Uh, look, I don't. Whatever you said was really good. I think you answered it. I was saying it does it make them more vulnerable to the um to trauma, the ADHD
Oh,
brain or the neurodivergent
yeah,
brain.
right. I think again, yes, though, because their brain is already tweaked, uh, they're more sensitive.
Mm,
So it kind of sets them up to experience trauma.
different,
So
maybe.
interesting. No, excellent point. So what's so interesting about trauma? We talk about trauma as if it's one thing. It's not. The same thing can happen to two different people. One person can be traumatized by it, and one person,
Right.
eh, it was great.
Yeah.
So yes, that having that pre disposition because of the cortisol and the adrenaline levels being higher, it actually does make them more susceptible to having, again, a more full-fledged experience of dysregulation and a more significant impairment from trauma. Because yeah, we have a set point. All of us have a set point in terms of what our typical average cortisol level and adrenaline level are. Uh, but their susceptibility is higher because their set point is higher and their
That's
sensitivity is higher.
that's excellent. I'm glad you said that way because that explains why a lot of people they they discredit or they devalue someone's experience with a toxic relationship because they themselves have been through, I have people say all the time, "Oh, Dorie, everybody has bad relationships." And you are absolutely
Over it.
correct. Huh? Just get over it.
Why,
Exactly.
why can't you just get over it?
Yeah. And you just painted a beautiful picture, at least for me. I hope the listeners can see what you just said because we're two different people. And I just said that in my youth, I'm starting to wonder if I had more ADHD symptoms, and I've always been told I'm sensitive my entire life. You know, this experience for me caused a different kind of damage than it caused for someone else.
Absolutely, absolutely. So they talk about chronic overwhelm. So people that are, even if we just use the more common term of having people that get labeled as sensitive,
Right.
uh, wherever they're at on the spectrum, ADD, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, Asperger's disorder. And I
Mhm.
really don't like the word disorder, but it's still kind of hard to
Right.
get out of my own language. Brains that function differently.
Mhm.
But chronic overwhelm. So thinking about, again, a person that has had no quotes significant prolonged trauma in the world, but they have
Mhm.
this more sensitive brain. Uh, they're living in a world not designed for their nervous system, which
Mhm.
leads to what we call relational trauma. That's your toxic trauma,
Yes.
which leads to cumulative trauma.
Mhm.
Trauma builds too is the other thing that I should have said. Having, even if you never had, quote, that huge, most horrific trauma where you felt like your life was at risk, someone holding a gun to your head. But many, many small cumulative traumas, and particularly in a person whose brain is not built for a world. We live in a world constantly now where you're bombarded with stimulation. You know,
Right. Right.
everything's always on. We're always on our devices. There's always information coming at you, or you're using the latest AI tool, whatever it is. But
Right.
this sensory overload for individuals whose brains are not wired to manage that, and all of our brains are increasingly being overwhelmed by this. Even people
Right.
that aren't quote neurodivergent, because the amount of information that's just out there now it's just ridiculous, honestly. Uh, so yeah, chronic overwhelm is the thing that you want to think about. Our most all of our brains are not uh, designed to manage the level of information that we get thrown at us at any given time. So if your brain is already again tweaked to be sensitive to that much stimuli, you're going to tip those emotional dysregulation points more frequently. Also, the other thing about emotional dysregulation, I should have said, is in addition to being more sensitive to it, people that are neurodivergent by and large um, have a harder time regulating back down. So it's
Yeah.
not only that you experience the sensitivity higher, they have a harder time bringing themselves back down to that calm place. It takes them a little longer than is typical.
Is that where some of the ruminating comes in, or some of things like that, or
I
uh,
think certainly the ruminating, because the ruminating again is probably going to be related to that amygdala and
okay.
the fear sensing piece, you know,
Okay.
because your brain can kind of get stuck in a cycle.
Right.
One fear makes me worry about another fear, which makes me worry about another fear, you know.
Right.
So you get these spiraling, negative cascading thoughts. Uh,
Right.
So yeah, I can't shut down my amygdala. I can't shut down my rational thoughts of what on a scale to 0 to 10, what is the objective risk of whatever the situation is? Is it a 5? For that person that again their system is neurodivergent, it's a little more sensitive.
Hmm.
They can live around a 7 or 8. No matter what has happened, I'm living around about a 7 or 8 that could go real,
Right.
then my amygdala won't shut down. It won't stop, keep sending me the message that this is a fearful world. I wasn't protected. My needs weren't met. And then at the same time, that frontal lobe, that executive planning is shut down. Your brain's literal capacity and ability to use reason and logic goes offline.
Wow.
When your
Wow.
amygdala is running things internally, the subcortical part is selling fear. Your ability to like they've done like research, put people in MRIs and look at brain flows and all that. And the frontal lobe, it's not working. It's literally off. You have
Wow.
no capacity to use reason logic. They can't do a simple math problem because their brain
Wow.
is stuck back in the reptilian part of the brain. The cerebellum is the oldest structure in your brain. It regulates that cortisol release, uh, that adrenaline release, and it's pumping blood to your arms and your legs to run. So the cerebellum is running your brain, your amygdala is running the brain, and your frontal lobe that does all that smart reasoning and planning and stuff that we do. It's not in the conversation.
Oh, wow. So it doesn't even exist.
It's not. So I mean, it makes sense from a neurobiological perspective. If your body loses the capacity to do rationality, then you again can oftentimes get stuck in that amygdala fear cycling negativity, can't shut it down.
Mm.
So and that's actually I drive the psychiatrist on my team crazy because I'm fascinated with the neurobiology of the brain and how all this works. Because going back to ADHD, one of the most common treatments or medical treatments to behavioral treatments for ADHD too, I should say first, learning
Mhm.
behavioral skills. But one of the medication treatments for ADHD, one of the most commonly prescribed medications is Ritalin or methylphenidate is the clinical name. What methylphenidate, because this blew my mind when it kind of finally clicked when after 10 psychiatrists explained it to me. Methylphenidate is a stimulant. And I was
Huh.
trying to figure out how a stimulant, you think of stimulants as being activating,
Right.
helps a person who can't focus slow down and focus. But the neurobiology of how methylphenidate works in the brain is it activates receptors in the brain that are actually, even though it's a stimulant, their role in the brain is it activates putting on the brakes. So it's kind of putting on the brakes to the amygdala so that frontal lobe can come back on and reason and focus can resume. Yeah, because that always got me. It's like, how does a stimulant calm me down? I mean, because you can
Right.
drink some coffee because I need to wake up in the morning.
Right.
But the chemical, the way that it works at the neuroreceptor level with stimulants, Adderall, methylphenidate, is it allows the frontal lobe to slow down so reason comes back online. Sorry,
Wow.
I'm off on a tangent.
Hey, I could talk about this all day too, but you're right. We gotta get back focused because again, I think a lot of people, including myself, that I'm working with, this whole ADHD and trauma thing working together, helping them heal from this or even recognize that these that the trauma is what's causing a lot of your problems, your inability to focus, your fog, your
Brain
hyperactivity, all the things.
hypervigilance,
Yes,
hyperactivity.
yes, the spiraling and all the things. Um, can healing the trauma help with the ADHD symptoms?
And I'm absolutely just to kind of dig into that healing the trauma absolutely does because it's gonna lower your baseline cortisol and adrenaline level in your brain when you process trauma. uh, you discharge it from your whole body, actually, not even just the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma is held throughout our bodies. We know trauma. Some of the common ways we know that trauma is held throughout our bodies is people who have experienced, extreme trauma often are tense. They experience tightness in their body. They experience a lot of somatic complaints, a lot of bodily complaints. They'll often talk about having GI issues. My
Mm-hmm.
stomach's upset.
Oh yeah,
Food's not digesting well. So
yeah.
trauma can be held throughout your body. So when you process that trauma, usually most commonly through talk therapy, there's lots of modalities. We can talk about treatment modalities later. Uh, but when you process that trauma, so you can release that trauma from your body and through your mind, uh, your cortisol level, your adrenaline levels can come down, which can allow again you to kind of have that emotionally dysregulation under control.
Yeah.
So the first step is absolutely, like I say, we can talk about a lot of different ways, a lot of different behavioral techniques. We talked very quickly about medication, but yeah, we can talk about the different medications and different interventions that different types of clinicians use to help people process the trauma, work through the trauma, and learn skills to keep themselves regulated, and it's going to both decrease their sensitivity to um, going offline, so to speak, uh, when they're interacting with people, whether it's on the job, whether it's in a platonic relationship, or a more emotionally heightened interpersonal relationship. So yes, I think the first step is having an awareness of if people have a trauma history, seeking talk therapy and opportunities to learn skills to address it, process it, so they're not experiencing, flashbacks, so they're not experiencing dissociation, so they can spend more time uh, kind of with their peaceful, most best selves, wherever they lie on the spectrum on a day-to-day basis, based on any neurodivergence or that they have that's just part of the wiring of their brain from childhood.
Okay.
That's a long way of
Um,
yes.
say that again.
I said that was a very long way of saying yes to your question.
I like words, lots of words. So you mentioned some of the approaches, talk therapy, medication, even some of the somatic practices. What are some of the other approaches that people can use to regulate their nervous system?
All right, absolutely. So there are a number. A lot of them kind of fall under um, kind of broad category of vagus nerve stimulation. Engaging the vagus nerve is this nerve that runs from your brain all the way through your body, and so we've learned that anything that you do that calms your largest nervous system, your vagus nerve system, calms your body down and helps with these. Those are very common and simple tools that you can do, such as breathing. There's
Okay.
a exercise called square breathing. I'm sure you've heard about, where essentially you're counting your breaths. You're taking slow, deep breaths in to the count of four. You're holding your breath to the count of four, and you're taking slow, exhaling, relaxing breaths maybe to the count of six, and you can increase that. And it is so powerful. And it is something
Wow.
that people can do, and like people don't even know that you're doing it. If you know you're going into a job interview and it's gonna produce some anxiety or some feelings, you can kind of very quietly to yourself be doing square breathing, breathing in slowly through your nose to the count of four, counting internally, holding your breath for the count of four, and exhaling very slowly to the count of four. So just breathing exercise are things, is an example how you can calm your cerebellum, your amygdala, all the frontal cortex, all those wonderful parts of the brain we were talking about before. And as you do that, you're calming your body down and you're allowing that frontal lobe to come online, stay online, so you can reason, execute, plan, sequence your actions, behaviors, and thoughts. A lot of new work on vocal. I'm doing actually a lot of research on this now myself. Vocal humming, singing exercises. So
Hmm.
obviously you're not going to do that in your interview. Uh, New research that can show very specific types of humming and singing exercises for many people can be self-soothing and calm the body, calm that vagus nerve. Um, Very simple tools. I like to start off with the basic, simple stuff that you can do along just great books, YouTube videos, check your sources. You can find cold water exposure. Our moms have told us since day one, go splash some water on your face, baby. But there's like scientific research that cooling our face, cooling our heads and our brains, and it can kind of shift our focus and our attention and help us kind of get to a reset. Of course, we're doing these things before we're in a heightened state, right? These are the kind of very first tertiary steps that we can do to help reset ourselves. Uh, Deep pressure, for a lot of people, getting a massage, again, deep tissue massage therapy can help calm and release stress from the body. Uh, for people that are neurodivergent, in particular on autistic spectrum, we've used for a number of years weighted blankets. And I'm not exactly sure. I've done a deep dive into the research on why weighted blankets when you sleep, or wearing a weighted vest. It's just something about it. It impacts your bodies feel that muscle, and you're having to use a little more intentionality to move. So I know people
Mhm.
that wear weighted vests under their clothes, or they sleep with a weighted blanket. So deep pressure and proprioceptive touch stuff is another big way that people can, you know, either with the help of a therapist or do some research on your own to help calm that vagus nerve. There's a whole field of therapy called tapping, and it's bilateral tapping. And you
Yeah.
doing this like left right tapping because our brain has two hemispheres, and there's something about the tapping that can reset us to a calm point. Um, so yeah, those are some of the, and I can talk about some of the grounding techniques, sitting with our feet on the ground and
Mhm.
feeling, bringing yourself into awareness of your feet on the ground
Mhm.
can help calm us. Orienting uh, orienting ourselves to safety, pausing to look around the room and letting
Mhm.
your eyes rest on something can help reset us and help us uh, calm our minds and our brains and our body. It all works together. The five, four,
Yeah.
three, two, one technique, where
Yeah.
it anchors you in presence by identifying five things you see, hear, touch, taste is going on. They all just very unconsciously force us to calm ourselves, calm our brain. So those are a few things that either with a little YouTube research
Mhm.
or a couple of good books that you can really do on your own to teach yourself some self-regulating skills. Whether you identify as neurodivergent, whether you identify as a person who has experienced mild traumas or significant traumas, that they can be helpful across the spectrum.
What about movement and exercise? I think I've heard before that that helps with
Absolutely,
regulating. How,
absolutely. So
can you explain how?
yeah, so it's that same thing. Anything that causes you to engage your body and kind of honestly kind of distract your body, and to train your bodies and your muscles to release stress, to release tension, are going to lower your cortisol. They're going to lower your adrenaline, and the body remembers,
Mm,
so, practicing movements, exercising, I was going to mention yoga, are all excellent ways because you're getting the physical benefits of it, but like neurochemically and neurobiologically, moving your body forces your mind to focus, it forces cortisol levels to decrease, forces that adrenaline level to decrease. So movement can be key. Same thing, the same idea with the proprioceptive stuff and the weighted vest. You're just forcing your body to move and remember and be unstressed.
yeah, that's when you mentioned the weighted vest, that made me think about the exercise. I'm like, huh, intentional movement, forcing your body, because that's what you're doing when you're exercising. You're forcing your body to do things that you're not normally doing.
Right.
So what should someone that is experiencing these ADHD symptoms, the brain fog, the confusion, the um inability to focus, what should someone that's experienced that do to determine if it's really ADHD or if it's trauma related?
Absolutely wonderful question. The first thing I would say, because I'm going to take one step back first, because I think, in a good sense, TikTok and YouTube and social media and the internet has brought a greater awareness to neurodivergence, ADHD, and trauma. More
Mhm.
people have it somewhere out there in their mind that, hey, I think I may be on the neurodivergence scale. I may have a little ADD. I may have a little some trauma at whatever level, and I think that's good, that awareness of it, because that has allowed more of us to do the recommendation, which is seek a referral for a counselor, a psychologist or psychiatrist who specializes in the treatment and the evaluation of ADHD, autistic spectrum disorders, Asperger's, to because they're excellent clinical tools that can evaluate, because they look at um, and particularly in the world of ADHD, to have a diagnosis of that, you need to have these struggles with attention, emotional regulation, and focusing in multiple contexts. It can't just be when I'm around Johnny, I get, I'm forgetful and things like that. It needs to be it needs to one actually impair your ability to achieve goals in an environment, and it has to be in multiple contexts. So typically, a lot of times this happens with very young individuals. So we're like, is it happening both in the school setting and in a work setting and in a personal relationships? Uh,
Mhm.
but great like clinical questionnaires that you complete to evaluate in terms of ADHD, autism spectrum disorder. So seek out a professional, whether it's a counselor that specializes in that area, a psychologist, which is a PhD level individual, or a psychiatrist if medications are indicated. So seek those referrals. Similarly, with trauma evaluations, one of the most commonly used tools is a screening tool called the Adverse Childhood Experiences tool
Mm.
is used to screen for one of the tools used to screen for trauma because you need to be evaluated by a professional who is knowledgeable in these areas, knows what the appropriate evaluation tools are, given your age, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where I would recommend starting there, seeking that consultation. And again, I'm glad that social media and internet has brought more awareness so people can think about that. And I think one thing that actually has done too is it's lowered the stigma around,
Mhm.
ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, Asperger's disorder, and even trauma. You see more
Right.
people more willing to talk about, hey, I've had some, even if they say it in a casual language, I've had some traumatic experiences in my life. But I think the more we talk about this, the more we give education on it, hopefully the more individuals that will go in and seek those thorough evaluations from experts in the counseling, psychology, and psychiatry field to evaluate, where if one or both of these things are occurring for people.
Wow. Okay. Well, if you had to give just one message to people to understand the let me reword that. What is one message you want people to understand about the connection between trauma and neurodivergence?
Absolutely. So I talked, I'm going to go back one other thing and I'll absolutely answer your question now. I talked about some of the things that we can do on our own in research, just books and YouTube to self-soothe. I do want to just kind of throw out a couple of very specific treatments that if you go and get that evaluation, you find that you are somewhere on the spectrum or have some trauma that people that therapists, clinicians, psychiatrists use. That's somatic experiencing therapies, trauma informed yoga, EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy,
Mhm.
and poly informed therapy. So they can go back, do a little research on that, get your evaluation first. Uh,
Okay.
so if they start using those terms, so you can start becoming familiar with it. But in terms of your specific question about kind of an overall, when we're thinking about these areas again of being anywhere on the spectrum from ADHD to Asperger's and trauma. Uh, for me, doing things like what you're doing, bringing awareness around this, because the central goal is going to be moving beyond these labels to understand whether a person's struggles are whether they're neurodevelopmental, a response to chronic stress, or some intersection of the both. Just
Mhm.
we need to move beyond labels, be open to getting professional assessments, and know that there are excellent uh, behavioral interventions that you can do yourself and work that you can do with therapists to treat and experience a more joyful, calm, centered, emotionally regulated life. So I just want to let people know that help is out there. There's lots that you can do yourself, but I think it does all start with getting an appropriate evaluation. So one, both working together. They're just wonderful supports either way.
Wow. Well, I appreciate your help so much. I always enjoy talking to you. I know we can talk for hours for real about
Great.
a lot of this stuff.
I appreciate what you do, getting this information out to the public, especially in our community and marginalized communities. Unfortunately, sometimes the resources aren't there, and a lot of people don't get an opportunity to hear this information, to know that to differentiate the different pieces that it could be, to know that the help is out there. So the more widely we can get that information out there, I think what you do is really, really great.
And I don't want to, because this could be a whole other conversation, but with you just mentioning even marginalized communities, a lot of these communities, they actually are living in a low grade PTSD
Yep.
state anyway, because
Like
of
we did
all
it.
the things that,
So my research, my grad school research is in certified research, and so it talks about um, you can live in an environment
yeah,
that, because of the environment, because of things like the social determinants of health, because of poverty, because of lack of resources to uh, doctors,
yeah,
healthy food. We talked
yeah,
about exercise and movement. There's no
yeah,
park in your neighborhood. That's a loud, chaotic neighborhood. Maybe there's gunfire in your neighborhood every day. That again, that cortisol, that adrenaline,
yeah,
that's tweaked by that. That is a toxic experiment, a toxic
right,
environment. So we talk
yeah,
about relationships. Your whole environment can somewhat be toxic. And how do you learn? Say again, you're growing up in poverty. You're growing up with there's limited clean, healthy food. So you're eating, a lot of highly processed foods. You're not, maybe you economically can't afford to buy a lot of vegetables and fruits and things like this. All of these systems work together. So
yeah,
yeah, toxic environments and social determinants of health are very key to this. And again, that's why I like that you put this information, this education out there broadly, so everyone, regardless to race, ethnicity, economic level, have some exposure to it. And there are good public community health centers, even if you are living in an environment where there's not as many doctors, clinicians, therapists.
right.
You can seek those out where they are in your community.
Wow. Well, again, thank you so much. I appreciate um you sharing with us today, and it's very informative. It's enlightening to me, so I know the listeners will definitely get something out of it. Um, yeah.
Well, I
So
actually
on.
I speak to you too. So again, appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you thinking of me to speak to my experience with it. It's just anytime. I love what you do. Just keep up the great work.
Alrighty. Well, thank you. So thanks for listening to Don't Ask Me Shit, where the truth might be uncomfortable, but it will set you free if you're willing to do the work. If something you heard today hit home, sit in it, process it, and decide what you're going to do next to change the situation that you're in. And remember, you can always ask Coach Dorie, but if you're not ready to do the work, don't ask me shit. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who needs a real conversation in their life, and we will see you the next time.